we have to prioritize growth, and even a slightly larger budget deficit is tolerable, provided the expenditure promotes growth. Infrastructure spending has promoted growth. It's also brought in private investment. Infrastructure spending that helps export, like the Gati Shakti program, and domestic growth will also help. So I think we should not worry too much about the size of the budget deficit, but we should worry a lot about the nature of the budget deficit. Any expenditure that promotes growth is welcome. And in the long run, we need to reduce subsidies and provide direct transfers, which are more efficient in helping the poor than subsidies. Subsidies cause a lot of distortions, and we really need to move on that over time. I also suspect that there may be a temptation to be advanced on the budget populist. That should be, hopefully that will be resisted.
Our mainly focus is on the manufacturing sector, whether it is defense manufacturing, MSME, rural cottage industries, and through cooperatives or farmer producer organization value addition at the agriculture sector. These are the areas where we think important employment generation can come forward. And we also understand that for manufacturing sector to grow and investment in the private sector, we need certain demand creation. So government is working on the demand creation. And there are other measures which we are working, whether it is defense procurement from domestic producers, etc., or reserving tender up to 200 crores for the local manufacturers, and working for a free trade agreement with countries where our manufacturing can integrate with the global supply chain, which are beneficial to the country, not like ASEAN and other, which were counterproductive to our manufacturing sector.
Growth, see, the government is not a good businessman. So government's investment in public sector infrastructure yields you a very poor return, both in terms of value added as well as the return on investment. So until and unless we accept that truth, that we have massive investment in our public sector, count the railways, the NHAIs and other public sector into that, over about 40 to 45 lakh crores of investment is sunk in there. And the revenue which comes in the form of the non-tax revenues in the form of dividends or the surpluses transfer, if you exclude the surpluses transfers from RBI, etc., the return is not even 0.5%. The quality of investment which is happening in last few years, bulk of we invest about 3 to 4 lakh crores in public sector still. Bulk of that investment goes into the railways and the roads, and both of them, or the metro rails, if you take that way, all three of them are enormously loss-making. They don't give you even a single, in fact, you lose capital on every crore of investment made there. Yeah. So both, it's good to sort of invest in infrastructure to sort of give the economy a wider chance to participate and multiply. But the government as the primary agency to make that investment productively is a poor choice. Unfortunately, again, in our country, over last 75 years or so, including the last 8-9 years, we have converted our private sector into a sector which largely produces for the government, not for the people as such, not for the consumers. You take it for, so everybody who runs any enterprises connected with railways or roads, as I mentioned, or even for production of power and others, is primarily producing for the government. So we don't have, many times people ask you that why why don't we have the world-class companies in the country? Why don't we have why don't we produce for the world? If you look at them, that you find that basically the private sector has not got the chance to innovate, to create technologies, to even in the new age technologies which are coming up in the form of whether it's the information technology or semiconductors or this digitalization, even the new schemes which we have started, the PLIs, which are generally rated as very forward-looking and successful. But if you get into the basics of that, then you would find that these are not going to create the world-class enterprises in times to come.
I would just summarize that in three things: that service sector should also find place in optional presumptive tax regime to widen the tax base. The second point that I made on ESG, we must look at the introduction of the green taxes and incentives, both looking at it as a source of revenue and also looking at it doing good to the planet. And third, to make sure that we are not overburdening the taxpayers for reporting, but at the same time nudging them to transparently share how they pay their taxes, a voluntary reporting framework. And that would help slowly and gently inch towards better tax GDP ratio.
My suggestion actually would be to front load more projects in the next 12 months in light of the likely demand vacuum we will see from exports and private investments. Now, from a more medium-term perspective, I think global threat is definitely an opportunity for India, because the kind of challenges that US is facing right now in terms of inflation, very tight monetary policy, the energy crisis in Europe, these countries, on our estimates, even in 2024, will have GDP growth of 0%. So I think for countries like India, where the bigger challenges right now are more in terms of global spillovers, a DM recession also means that the commodity prices come off and terms of trade actually become more favorable. So the ability of India to actually bounce back after the hit faster in 24 will be a lot more. And while there is right now globally a lot of focus on China reopening, China growth, I think medium-term diversification from China, both in terms of the trade supply chains, but also broad investment diversification from China, is an opportunity for other countries. And from India's perspective, therefore, the momentum we have and we are trying to push through the production-linked incentive scheme needs to continue during this period. Macro policies generally have to be more prudent so that once the global storm settles, investors basically come back to investing into India. Energy transition is an opportunity for us in terms of the green investments that we need to do to secure our own energy needs in the future. And I think given the size of India, this one approach of focusing only on manufacturing, instead of that, it has to be a broad-based, all-rounded approach to growth. So whether it is food processing in the agriculture sector or the manufacturing sector, or within the services, it could be skills, it could be some other stuff which requires self-starters to actually take off on the services side. I think it needs to be an all-rounded strategy on growth. It cannot be just looking at manufacturing. And how do we get this growth? Ultimately, the growth comes because of course, you need the hard infrastructure, but beyond that, I think it's now time to focus a lot more on the softer aspects in terms of process reforms, compliance, law and order, contract enforcement, and sort of creating that enabling environment and competing on innovation not on the basis of subsidies. Across countries today, everybody's asking the same question: how do I get growth? And India, does stand out as having that opportunity. So for us, it's really about, the 2-3 things we need to do to grab that opportunity. So, I think there are challenges, but I am positive that we can do reasonably well.